My name is Margaret Hale. I am 76 years old, and I am speaking now because the distance between truth and silence has grown too small to ignore. For most of my life, I believed that understanding what you were doing was something that came later, if at all. I believed that intention mattered more than awareness, and that if you weren't actively hurting anyone, then whatever quiet harm you were doing to yourself didn't quite count. I believed that as long as you were functioning, showing up, paying bills, keeping promises, your inner life was a private matter, almost an indulgence. But time has a way of narrowing your excuses. It strips away the stories you tell yourself gently, patiently, until all that remains is what actually happened. I used to believe love was something you remained inside of, something you stayed loyal to even when it pressed against you, even when it asked you to make yourself smaller. I thought love was proven by how much discomfort you could tolerate without complaint. If you could endure quietly, patiently, without drawing attention to your unhappiness, that meant the love was real, or at least respectable. Respectable mattered a great deal where I came from. I'm sitting at my kitchen table as I say this. It's the same table I've eaten at for more than 30 years. The wood is worn smooth in places where my hands have rested again and again, where I've peeled apples, folded napkins, paid bills, signed birthday cards. One chair across from me is empty. It has been empty for a while now. I don't dramatize that anymore. I don't feel shattered by it. I simply notice it, the way you notice a missing tooth with your tongue long after the pain has passed. At this age, you don't tell stories to be admired. You don't tell them to sound wise or brave. You tell them because they have weight, and your body is tired of carrying them by itself. Memory becomes heavy when it's never been spoken. I don't know who will hear this. I don't know if it will land anywhere meaningful. I only know that I waited far too long to say these things out loud, and now silence feels less like discretion and more like dishonesty. When you're young, you don't think in terms of endings. You think in terms of endurance. You think about getting through the week, the year, the rough patch. You assume that if you can just make it past the hard part, something easier will eventually arrive. You imagine life unfolding like a series of thresholds. Once crossed, everything will feel more solid, more generous. No one tells you that sometimes the hard part is the shape of the life. I married Richard when I was 24. At the time, it felt like the right choice. He was steady, reliable. He worked at the phone company. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't drink excessively. He came from a family people described as good. That word was used often, as if goodness were a structure you could live inside without asking too many questions. No one tells you that those qualities can exist alongside a deep, unspoken loneliness. No one tells you that safety and emptiness are not opposites. In the beginning, I told myself that love wasn't meant to feel thrilling, that excitement was immature, that calm was the grown-up version of happiness. I told myself that stability mattered more than feeling understood, that partnership was about logistics, not intimacy, that love mellowed and this flattening feeling was simply maturity settling in. Those were the words I used. Feeling understood, feeling seen. I didn't fully know what they meant yet. I only knew that I lacked them, the way you know you're hungry before you can name what food you want. Richard was never cruel. That matters. But he wasn't curious either. He didn't ask questions unless something needed to be fixed or decided. My inner life did not register as something requiring attention. It existed, but separately, like a room no one entered. I worked as a receptionist at a dental office. I liked the predictability of it, the clean schedules, the sense of being useful. People thanked me for small things, appointments remembered, forms explained. It felt good to be noticed, even briefly. When Richard came home in the evenings, dinner was at 6, always. Meat, a vegetable, some kind of starch. We talked about errands, bills, appointments, repairs. We spoke efficiently. Our conversations were tidy, nothing spilled. I waited for him to ask how my day felt. Not what happened, not who came in, but how it lived inside me. He never asked, and I never demanded. At first, I assumed it would come later, after we were more settled, after work slowed down, after whatever invisible milestone I believed I was approaching. I kept postponing my need the way people postpone rest. I mistook patience for depth. We had one daughter, Ellen. I was 29 when she was born. I poured everything I didn't say into her lunches, into the careful way I folded her clothes, into the slow brushing of her hair in the mornings. All the tenderness I couldn't express out loud had somewhere to go. Motherhood gave my love a shape. Richard loved her in a practical way. Savings accounts, rules, planning, responsibility. He prepared her for the world. I loved her in a way that frightened me sometimes, like she was evidence that something in me was still alive and responsive, still capable of feeling intensely. The years didn't shatter our marriage. They wore it down quietly, like water against stone. No single moment felt dramatic enough to justify change. There was no betrayal, no violence, no clear villain, only accumulation. I stopped mentioning the things that hurt because explaining them felt heavier than swallowing them. Richard didn't notice the swallowing, or if he did, he interpreted it as peace. I told myself marriage was about endurance, that my mother had endured, that her mother had endured, that women like us were built to hold things in. We called it strength. We praised it constantly. We don't talk enough about how persuasive that belief can be. There were moments of temptation, small ones. A coworker who noticed when I cut my hair, a neighbor who lingered too long in conversation, a warmth in being seen that felt dangerous because it was simple. Nothing happened. I didn't allow it to. I went home proud of myself for choosing loyalty. I didn't realize I was also choosing silence. In my 40s, I began to feel tired in a way rest didn't touch. Not in my body, somewhere deeper. A fatigue that sleep didn't repair. Ellen left for college. The house grew quieter. Richard and I sat across from each other at dinner like colleagues finishing a shift. There was politeness, there was distance. I tried once, just once. I said, I feel lonely sometimes. Richard nodded and said, we all do. That was the end of the conversation. I told myself I had spoken up, that trying again would be undignified. That dignity meant letting things lie. Endurance often disguises itself as dignity. It's very convincing. Years passed. Promotions, illnesses, obligatory holidays, photographs where we stood close but never touched. A life that looked complete from the outside. I didn't hate my life. That's the dangerous part. It was manageable, respectable, safe. Then Richard got sick, lung cancer, diagnosed too late. He declined faster than either of us expected. Time collapsed into appointments and waiting rooms. I took care of him. I was good at that, very good. Caregiving gave me a role that made sense. Hospital rooms, folding chairs, paper cups of coffee, conversations with doctors that felt unreal. I learned new words. I learned how to listen without hope. People told me how devoted I was, how lucky he was. I nodded. I didn't argue. In the final weeks, he softened. Fear does that. He held my hand more. He asked if I was afraid. I said yes. It was easier than explaining the emptiness. One night he looked at me and said, "You were always so strong." It wasn't a compliment. It was a misunderstanding that came too late to correct. He died on a rainy Tuesday morning. After the funeral, people returned to their lives. That's how grief works. It doesn't keep an audience for long. I expected devastation, What I felt instead was a hollow relief that scared me, not because he was gone, but because the waiting was over. That's when I understood. I had confused love with endurance. I stayed because I could, not because I was sustained. The realization arrived quietly, with exhaustion. I looked back at all the ways I had postponed myself, the conversations I didn't insist on, the feelings I minimized, the years I dismissed as fine. Fine is a very long time to vanish. Ellen lives far away now. We talk on Sundays. She loves me. I know that. But she doesn't need me the way she once did. Sometimes I wonder what she learned from watching me. I don't ask. I tried dating once in my early 70s. I realized how unfamiliar being known had become. Desire felt like a language I had forgotten how to speak. I stopped. Not because it was painful, because I didn't remember how to want out loud. There are truths you can't unsee once they arrive. You can't go back and ask for more when the years that required bravery have already passed. I don't blame myself, but I don't romanticize it either. Endurance kept me married. It did not keep me alive. If you're younger and listening, I don't have instructions. I only know this. Love should not require your disappearance. If you are always adjusting, swallowing, waiting, you may be very strong and very alone. Strength is not fulfillment. I learned that too late. There is a quiet grief in realizing your life was smaller than it needed to be, not because you failed, but because you waited. I waited for permission. No one gave it. Now I make my tea in the morning. I watch the light move across the wall. I live honestly, finally. That H.